Yeah. There you go. Cool. That's a bit of an interesting start. So yes, hello. Welcome again to the Tech Talk Show. This is episode number 3. We are joined with Tim from Datto. Thank you for joining us again.
Right, we can see you this time. That's
Hopefully
great.
so. So today we are here to talk about business continuity. I guess specifically more towards the customers of ours that have servers and network infrastructure that need protecting. We had David on our show last week or 3 weeks ago because I was on holiday. Talking about the Office 365 protection, but the other part of the parcel, and for many people out there, are still running on-prem servers, or even if they're co-load somewhere else, they still have their own server infrastructure. So maybe just a bit of an intro on who you are and what you do at Datto would be brilliant.
Well, just a quick comment on kind of that opening statement you just made. I mean, we still see a significant amount of on-premise workloads and infrastructure that needs protecting. I think a lot of people have been caught up in this relentless march to the cloud and think, oh, everything's in the cloud now. Yeah. But the reality is, it's not. There's some fantastic workloads and applications that are in the cloud, but certainly in the small and medium business space, there's still an awful lot that is best delivered on site. And that's actually something that I've learned over the last 3 years. I actually joined Datto in 2016. And so I've been working in this space for the last 3 years. And it was quite a shift for me when I came to Datto. Datto is quite a small, kind of young American vendor. And prior to that, I spent a lot of time at big IT companies like IBM and HP. And that's where I spent a number of years in essentially the big enterprise space. And coming on working with kind of big banks, multinational retailers, those types of companies, to suddenly pivoting to small and medium businesses, it's completely different.
Datto's grown quite a lot though recent years, particularly recent years, I guess, hasn't it? Is that where is Datto like size-wise now? I've to be honest, from the outsider point of view, it seems like quite a large beast of a company because it's very much kind of, from our point of view, I guess industry standard nowadays with business continuity and disaster recovery and that kind of side of things, really.
Well, we have grown a lot, but we are still pretty small compared to a lot of the other bigger vendors. When I joined Datto in 2016, there were 700 employees.
Okay.
Now we're about 1,500.
Wow, okay.
It's not quite as the doubling that you might think it is. We've made an acquisition, and we've also merged with another company over the last 3 years.
So is that including the Autotask kind of merger? I see, okay.
Yeah, so when we merged with Autotask in January 2018, Datto was sitting at about 900 employees, and that then took us up to about 1,400. And then over the last year, we've hired an extra 100.
Blimey, it's a big change.
Yes, I mean, it is growing very rapidly, but that's largely down to organizations like Tekkers. We provide IT for you guys, and because you guys are growing so quickly, we're growing so quickly.
Well, it's interesting because we've always struggled to find decent backup solutions and backup providers out there. I mean, the likes of Symantec back in the day and age was always like the de facto industry standard backup exec. That was like, everyone would run their entire companies on backup exec. And from our personal opinion, it just seems to have got worse and worse over the years, and it's still the whole, take backup and you can still replicate to other cloud solutions and things, but it's still very manual, hands-on, just needs a lot of work to keep it going. Whereas the likes of Datto, and we've had quite a look at a lot of other providers, Datto is just, it's so simple. It's not excessively expensive, it probably sits there in the middle there, but it's just the service and solution, everything you get is just amazing. Which is why we've gone with Datto, and probably why Datto's grown and continuing to grow, I think, really.
Well, that's almost exactly what we set out to do, was to bring good, usable, and powerful features and package it up for small and medium businesses, and to really bring features and technology that used to be the realm of enterprise to everybody.
Yeah.
And I first joined IBM over a decade ago now, and back then, they were still doing a massive business in tapes, and IBM, for a long time, were the leading vendor of tape technology. And certainly, going back kind of 10, 15 years, tapes were still used an awful lot by a lot of small and medium businesses. They'd have a little external tape drive plugged into their Exchange server, and at the end of every day, a backup would capture. Somebody would swap the tape out, take it home, or put it in the boot of their car or something, and that was their backup.
Yeah. We're still seeing quite a fair bit of that, actually. So we've got a few customers still using tape, and they'll use like the robotic tape libraries that will kind of make sure and kind of automate it, but it's still the nightly backup. More often than not, we're coming across people that will replace the tapes with USB drives and then plug the USB drives in. It's a very cheap way of getting a backup solution because USB drives cost 50 quid or something for a couple of terabytes. but you're still reliant on the backup product and the software and the maintenance on that product, and having someone there to manually change them every night, which is just a pain, particularly with holidays and staff absences or sick or holidays, anything along those lines. Definitely the cloud backup solution we feel is the way to go, because it's just so kind of hands off and kind of takes care of itself. Maybe if I'll hand over to you a bit on that side of things.
Like I say, if you're an accountant, you can clearly see why something like tape or external hard drives are attractive. Like the cost per gigabyte, tape is still the best storage medium out there. There's no denying that. It's just cold hard facts. And next up is kind of consumer grade hard drives, which now go all the way up to capacity of 14 terabytes for a 3.5-inch drive. And they're not actually as expensive as you might think. So if all you're looking at was the numbers of how much data can I back up to what storage medium and how can I do that cheapest, tape is still that answer. But where things like tape and external hard drives falls down is the time to recovery. And that's probably more important than the cost per gigabyte. It's great if you've saved yourself 30 quid by using a cheaper storage medium, but if it takes you a whole day to get back up and running, you've completely negated all the savings you made from just choosing the cheapest option for actually capturing your backups. I
have to say we've not that we're trying to kind of push Datto to our customers or anything, but we've had quite a few examples recently where Datto's been their saving grace. One in particular, we did and I'm not sure the details surrounding it, but we did a Datto Cirrus appliance, which is one of the bigger appliances for one of our customers, and literally, and they hadn't had working backups for weeks and months, and literally went in. Must have been within the first month, I think. Their server that it was protecting had some massive failure, and we ended up running their servers on it probably for even like 2 or 3 months, because they were still trying to source the hardware and figure out what they're trying to do with procurement and things. But just having that service there that was backing up all the time, constantly, and it was just as flick of a button to switch it on and boot the server on the Datto appliance was just such a game changer. And they very, very much appreciated having that service there when it was there. But it's always the case of, like insurance, you never really know what you want until you need it, and then as soon as you need it, you wish you'd bought the most expensive, most sourcing and all dancing version of it. But sometimes it takes that little bit of a kind of a wake up call to know, really.
It's something we call a compelling event.
Yes.
People get burned by having some kind of disaster, and then they understand or appreciate a bit more why it's important to prepare for it in advance.
We had that exact scenario with, I think it was a solicitor's firm, and we quoted them some email protection software. Mm-hmm. They're like, no, I don't think we're no one's target. They're not going to do anything. It's fine. And then they literally had, I think it was 2 or 3 kind of successful hacking attempts, or ransomware or malware attempts. And then I made a mistake quoting them the software again, and I think I added an extra 0 to the end by mistake. And they came back and said, that's absolutely fine. Can we pay you in monthly instalments? It's like, okay, well, you can do. That's not a problem. But I've also made a mistake. It's actually like 1/10 of the cost of what you think it might be. But it just shows that it's literally that that moment of actually we're up said creek without a paddle. We really need to do something about it and protect ourselves going forward. That makes you think about it, really. So I think, are we going to look to do a bit of a demo example thing today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to actually take a look at the technology so you can see kind of how it works. But before we dive into that, there's a couple of things I wanted to just unpick from that example you shared, because you actually introduced a number of concepts there that some people may not actually be familiar with. So let's just kind of continue down the thought thread you had just for a moment earlier around what used to happen 5-10 years ago and kind of why that's no longer fit for purpose today. So the vast majority of small and medium businesses in the UK still back up just once a day. Typically it's a nightly backup job. Even if they've kind of put the tapes away and they're now using some kind of cloud storage repository or a more advanced backup solution, it's typically still once a day. And that means that potentially if they do have some kind of disaster or outage, they're going to be losing quite a bit of data, potentially up to a day's worth of data.
Yeah.
Now, some businesses, that level of data loss is acceptable. They can recover from it, and that's fine. But with more and more businesses relying even more heavily on IT and IT systems to drive their tills, their payment systems, their customer record systems, whatever it is, losing a day's worth of transactions, that could be catastrophic. And I'm not just talking about losing the data and maybe not having a record of your business, but fines and penalties under things like the GDPR if you've lost data. Maybe lost reputation. If you can't transact, your customers are going to get disgruntled. They're going to go elsewhere. And those are all things that are perhaps that small and medium businesses are even more sensitive to now in 2019 than they were even just 5 years ago in 2014.
it's moving a lot quicker nowadays. Like technology is such a benefit to businesses because it means you can move at a much faster pace and do things, transact a lot quicker, be more efficient. But it certainly has its drawbacks in terms of when you don't have it or if it's not working properly.
Well, that's the next point that is definitely worth us having a chat about is, this increased demand needs to be matched with better protection.
Yeah.
And that's what we set out to do as a vendor, is to bring a higher level of protection that previously wasn't either technically possible or was technically possible, was so expensive, it just wasn't relevant to small and medium businesses. We've tried to fix that problem by allowing small and medium businesses to consume, backup as a service from an organization such as Tekkers, to be able to get hourly backups or even 5 minutes backup intervals to really give them minimal data loss in the event of a disaster. So that was kind of mission statement number one from us, was to increase the quality of service for something like a backup and continuity solution.
Brilliant.
I mean, is that typically what you see across your customers now? They've gone from kind of daily backups to kind of hourly backups?
Very much so. It's certainly there's a few with daily backups still out there. Hourly backups we tend to try and gear them towards something like a Datto appliance because it takes that whole hassle away. And things from storage as well, because when you're backing up online, you don't have to worry about the physical disk or where it's going to, the tape. But very much so, normally the limiting factor is the cost, because you go from a £100 tape or a £50 hard disk to a monthly service where you're paying a much higher monthly fee, but then you're getting a different service for it. You're getting more of a business continuity and actual disaster recovery service, rather than just putting it all on the media and then just hoping and praying that when it comes to the day that you need it, that you're going to put it in and it's going to work, and you've still got the restoration times that you don't have with the cloud services, that you can just literally hit a play button and within 10 minutes, maybe half an hour, depending on the services that needed, it just comes up a lot quicker. But there's definitely a shift, and most of our customers we speak to nowadays, we're speaking about online backup, and they're like, no, I don't have to change tapes. Wow, I'm gonna yes, you've sold me on it.
Yeah.
Then it's just the commercials and the pricing that's the next kind of hurdle. But yeah, like I say, everyone's going that way, and it definitely needs to be the way, because you can get those 5-minute snapshots, the hourly snapshots. It's just such a game changer. A day's worth of work, when you're talking of companies that have like 60 odd staff that are fee earning, that's a lot of money potentially lost in just that day's worth of work. So to have to restore from last night backup just doesn't cut it most of the time now.
Now, that is kind of looking at what happens to data loss. Like if you have a disaster, how much data you're going to lose. But the other side of continuity is how long it takes you to recover. And I think you've already kind of alluded and mentioned this several times. And there are a lot of kind of online backup solutions that allow you to get really good levels of protection, but aren't necessarily quite as advantageous when it comes to recovering from a disaster. Because that's one of the major compromises of online backup, is that your bottleneck is your bandwidth, because you've got to upload your backups to the cloud, and then when you've got a disaster, you've got to pull them down from the cloud and then start the rebuild process. And that's also a problem that we've tried to fix. We realize that not every company has got a gigabit leased line that costs £3,000 a month, because that's just way out of the realms for small and medium businesses. And most SMBs are still on, maybe they might have a fiber to the cabinet, some fiber to the premises. Maybe they were looking at maybe 100 meg lines and for some SMBs, but vast majority, they're lucky to have 20 or 30 megabits of upstream bandwidth. And that's not much if you're looking at backing up several servers. No,
it's definitely not. We've actually seen the just on that as well, because it was interesting. When we were having a look at other backup providers, and it was everyone would advertise their disaster resiliency and all the stories they've got on cloud. But then you're like, so when it comes to it, I have to download my backup, do I? It's like, yeah, okay. So I've got a few terabytes worth of storage in the cloud. I'll now have to download that onto something before I can recover it. Well, that could take like a few hours, a few days in itself. That's been one of the big things, and that's one of the differentiators, I think, with the likes of Datto, and there's a few other providers that do it as well. But having the data kind of in the cloud but also synced locally is just a game changer again. Yeah, so we've built our solution around that concept of hybrid cloud, of having a bit of resource on site and then bursting out into a much larger resource pool that's offsite in the cloud. And it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. It gives you that rapid on-site recovery when you need it, but it also gives you that full off-site protections that, I don't know, if the building burns down or if there's a full site-wide power outage, you've still got data off-site that you can quickly recover from. Brilliant. And that is really how we've chosen to implement the rule of threes. Is that something you've come across before, rule of threes? Rule of threes. Enlighten me. I might have come across it, but it's one of those... Possibly, it's something that backup geeks will know about, but
in terms of the rest of the regular IT industry, it's kind of...
No, I do know what I'm talking about now, yes.
I've
Yeah,
bumped your memory.
but
So
explain,
rule of
yes,
threes.
fine.
Let me break it down. So rule of threes is simple. You have 3 copies of your data on at least 2 different mediums with at least 1 offsite. So 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
And so let's take tape as an example. You'd have copy 1 of your data in your production environment, copy 2 on tape number 1, copy 3 on tape number 2. And because you've got tapes and your production environment, that's 2 different mediums, and you've got to take one of those tapes off site, and that allows you to abide by the rule of threes.
Yeah.
The way we implement that with Datto's solution is that obviously copy 1 is in the production environment. Copy 2 is on the local Datto appliance that sits on site, capturing those backups. And copy 3 is offsite in the cloud. And because we've got data in the production environment and then in Datto's solution, that gives you 2 different storage mediums.
Where do you store your data? There's a question I'll throw out there.
Yeah, sure. So Datto has a network of 9 data centers worldwide that are specifically designed and built and managed by Datto for storing backups and providing continuity. Here in Europe, we've got a cluster of 3. We've got a data center just outside London, a data center in Munich in Germany, and then a data center in Reykjavik in Iceland. And they form a resilient cluster.
What was the completely slightly off topic? Were you using a data center in Havant for a while?
Yeah, so we used to use a data center in Havant, an old IBM building down at North Harbour.
That's right, yeah.
And that's where Datto's UK cloud was based from, I want to say 2012 to 2017.
Oh, I see,
And in 2017, we formed a migration from Portsmouth to Slough, just outside London.
Right.
And we actually ran the 2 data centers concurrently throughout 2017 and 2018. But I think September 2018 is when we've moved the last server over to London.
Brilliant. Cool. That's good to know because I didn't realise you'd moved away from it.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting.
So we absolutely loved the facility down, I think it was a Pier 1 building.
Yes, it was. Yeah, indeed.
Down,
Yeah.
And they were absolutely fantastic at providing us a data floor, but we ran out of space. They couldn't give us any more rack space, any more extra racks, and because we were growing so rapidly, we needed somewhere that would essentially give us a whole data hall just for us to use. So that was the motivation.
Not a bad problem to have. Well, a big problem to have, but not a bad one.
And at the same time, we also significantly upgraded our bandwidth. So we're a bit closer to some of the major hubs, being a bit closer to London, and we now get multi-gigabit bandwidth in and out of our data center, which is fantastic.
So in terms of the which we'll get onto the restoration side of things, when people restore into the Datto cloud, do you have like I guess you've got a kind of a set of servers with a chunk of storage doing the backup side of things. Do you then have a separate set of servers, resources ready for the restoration side of things? How does that all work?
Yeah, pretty much exactly that.
Okay.
And actually, this is probably an appropriate time just for me to bring up a quick graphic that we will talk through in detail.
Yeah,
but for those of you that are watching the live stream, it might help you visualize some of this. So I'm just on Datto's website at the moment, and I'm on the kind of one of our product pages for this continuity platform, Cirrus, that we've been describing. And I'm just going to scroll down to find this diagram right here. Yep, here we go. Let me just zoom in on that. So this diagram kind of outlines the way that the solution works. So what you just described is having your kind of servers on standby ready to recover.
Yeah.
And that's essentially exactly what we've got. In all of our data centers, we have hundreds and, in fact, thousands in some of our larger facilities of what we call cloud nodes that just sit there on standby. These cloud nodes are our own technology, so we spec up the hardware. We've designed the software stack from scratch for these.
Oh, wow, okay.
And it's actually a pretty similar software stack to what we run on our actual appliances. So we use a lot of open source technology. So we use Linux kernel, we use KVM hypervisor, and we use ZFS for pooled storage. Brilliant. And so, in our cloud, we have hundreds and thousands of these nodes on standby. We actually store backups on these nodes.
Right.
So then when we actually have a disaster, we take those backups, convert them into VMs, and spin them up using the compute and memory resources of those nodes. And that's why we get such good recovery times, because we have really close proximity of data storage to compute and memory resources.
Brilliant. That's definitely one of the big selling points from my point of view is that the recovery times, because you can literally just hit there, hit the play button or what have you, and then within a very short amount of time it's restored. You don't have to go through a restoration process. It's kind of like a boot up process.
Exactly.
Else.
So part of our software stack is that the moment of a backup is captured, we will then process that backup and do all the heavy lifting to get it ready to go in the event of a disaster. And we do that at the point of backup. A lot of recovery solutions will do that at the point of recovery. So they capture backup, they store the backup, and then when you want to restore, they then process it all and get it ready and go, and that takes time. We front load that so that we do that at the point of backup so that the moment you need to recover, it's ready to go.
So maybe just go into that a bit more in terms of the testing side of things. So you back up every day, and or back up every hour or 5 minutes or what have you, and then you go to test that. What process does it go through to test?
Well, that actually brings back to the diagram that we brought up. And let me just talk this through for those who are audio only. So the way that the overall backup process works is that the production environment, the servers that need to be protected, have a backup agent installed on them. And that allows the Datto device that Tekkers will spec up and install to actually capture backups. So there's a bit of software that's installed on the machine that needs to be protected. And then the actual appliance is paired with that, and that allows it to capture image-based snapshots of the production server.
Okay.
And so the point you made was, how does that actually test and prepare this? Well, the actual backup appliance itself captures that image-based backup, converts that backup into a virtual machine, and actually performs a little bootability test at least once a day for every server to make sure that the backups are healthy and that they can definitely be recovered in the event of a disaster.
So it actually boots the server up and tests that it can boot.
And we do that on the Datto device itself because it has its own compute and memory resources, it has its own hypervisor, and so there's no impact on the production environment. That's something that we really pay quite close attention to, is that we don't want to disrupt what's going on with the main production server, and so we try to put as little workload onto that production server as possible. All it has to do is say, here's my change data, that's transferred over to the Datto appliance, then the Datto appliance itself goes and does its thing and uses its own resources to actually run that test.
Brilliant. Perhaps could we run on to if we could do a bit of a demo? I think we've lost one of the cameras again, so we probably just need to fix that. I don't know if you wouldn't mind going through the restoration process, and I'll quickly have a nose at the camera and try and fix that.
Sure. So, and we've been talking about it academically so far. Let's actually show this in action. So what I'm doing is I'm logging onto the interface of a Datto Cirrus continuity appliance. This appliance is running on a bit of hardware that's sitting on site with the production environment that needs to be protected, and this particular appliance is actually backing up 8 servers, and these servers kind of replicate the IT that's required by a small or medium business. So we've got a couple of workstations, we've got a few servers, so domain controller, exchange server, a couple of application servers, and so on. And what we're actually going to do is we are going to look at a couple of the recovery options that are available built into the feature set of this on-premise appliance. The first thing we're actually going to look at is a file restore. File restores are kind of the bread and butter of any backup solution, and with Datto Cirrus, we make file restores really straightforward. They can be done in less than 15 seconds. Let me show you. Let's say we wanted to recover a file that maybe had been deleted or had some corruption, and we know it was definitely there at lunchtime yesterday. I'm going to go to one of my backup points from lunchtime yesterday, so 12 p.m. from the day before, and I'm selecting that backup point as the restoration target. And then just with a couple of clicks later, I've mounted up the file system of that backup point. This whole process typically takes the appliance less than 10 seconds. So a technician that's actually performing this restore inside of just 4 or 5 mouse clicks, and in less than 15 or 20 seconds, they can be browsing through the backup of this server from that point in time and recovering data. This particular server this particular workstation has got 3 volumes. I've got my C drive with my Windows installation on it, and if I navigate through into that C drive, I can immediately see all of the data that was present at that particular point in time at lunchtime yesterday. And obviously this server's got a few other volumes as well, and so at this point I then go and locate the actual data that I would need to recover and start the restoration process. So file restores are super quick and super easy. But file restores are still just backup. They're not actually business continuity. Let's look at how this solution actually becomes business continuity. If I select one of these machines, let's select this Exchange server as an example, I then have a range of other options that really allow me to recover an entire server quickly and easily. And we actually provide 3 options for recovering an entire server as a virtual machine. The first option is what we call local virtualization, and it allows the on-site Datto appliance to take a backup, convert it into a virtual machine, and boot it up using the built-in hypervisor on the appliance. We can also do the same thing off-site in Datto's cloud, and this is what we were talking about a little bit earlier, where Datto maintains hundreds and thousands of cloud nodes around the world on standby, ready to use this virtualize in the cloud option. And the clever part about this virtualize in the cloud option is that the on-site Datto appliance will create a VPN link to Datto's cloud to connect that off-site recovery to the local network seamlessly and securely. And finally, the third option is what we call virtualize via hypervisor. This allows the Datto appliance to leverage an external VMware or Hyper-V host to recover a server. So all three of these options allow you to recover an entire server quickly and easily. The one I'm going to quickly show you is this local virtualization option. Again, I can choose any backup point. So I choose a backup point from before the disaster that we're trying to recover from. And then just with a few clicks, I'm able to allocate this backup point, compute and memory resources, network interfaces, and so on. And then I'm able to actually start the recovery process. I've just hit that Start VM button. And now the Datto is finding that VM file that it's previously created associated with this backup point from earlier this week that I've selected. It's allocating some resources to that virtual machine file and then powering it on. And this whole process typically takes the Datto appliance between 6 and 10 seconds. There we go, that recovery process is now kicked off. And if I click through on this thumbnail, we get to watch a VM booting up, and what we can currently see is just the Windows boot process. This really is the highlight of my day, watching those little circles chase each other around. But you know what? If you've suffered a disaster, this is exactly what you want to see. Because in just a few minutes, you've got a whole server booting up again from a good, healthy backup. And this is really what sets business continuity apart from just plain backup. If we're relying on external hard drives or tapes or even a cloud storage repository, what we'll be watching right now is a progress bar as that backup point is recovered and restored. But instead, because the Datto appliance has already done all the heavy lifting and has got everything ready, what we're watching is the server coming back online, and it minimizes the downtime from hours or days to just a few minutes. And that's really the power of business continuity solutions, and particularly the type that we've chosen to implement at Datto.
Brilliant. I think I might need to join you on your sofa. One of our cameras has died. The battery's run out on it, unfortunately.
Well, let me shuffle up and we can be buddies on this couch.
Over there or something, perhaps. Reach it. There we go. Fine.
So what I've just shown is kind of one of our recovery options, and there's a whole plethora of different tools and resources that are available. Welcome to the sunny side.
Thank you very much. Hopefully that's hopefully it will reach and you can still get to there. Brilliant.
If I shuffle myself
Nice and
slightly
cozy
this way.
on the sofa here. There we go.
There we go. But yeah,
So it really is straightforward, and this is one thing which we've kind of thought was really powerful about the Datto side of things, is that yes, there are lots of checks that go on in the background to make sure it's all working properly and you can restore properly and quickly, and it backs up regularly. But it's generally, once it's up in the Datto solution, it's kind of managed by you guys at that point, and trusting that the restoration does work. And in terms of the is it not daily checks, but every time a backup's taken, every time the backup's then checked, made sure it does actually work, and it's that's reassurance, because when you're doing the traditional tape backups and USB backups, you get none of that, unless you then decide to actually, I'm going to do a restoration test, and then it's where do you restore to? You need to buy some server hardware or rent some hardware in, which we've done for a few customers before. You can spend thousands of pounds on both the time to do the restoration test as well as potentially renting the hardware in, and it just gets very complicated for something like this, where you can literally just hit the restore button, test it, make sure it actually boots.
and for the exact reasons you've just been describing, the vast majority of small and medium businesses in the UK will typically do some kind of disaster recovery test maybe once a year.
If you're lucky. Yeah.
But with the technology we've developed as part of our business continuity solution, it makes it really easy to do full disaster recovery tests. And that gives you peace of mind that if something does go wrong, you've tried it, you've practiced it, you know how long it's going to take, and it just brings it all under control. And
so with the, and that's something, again, I like with the Datto side of things, is that you can do recovery tests and actually DR tests, which effectively is going through the process you've done now, I think, isn't it, really? To spin up your servers, make sure it actually boots in a production environment. If you need to then have a VPN tunnel back to your office to kind of tie up the two and make sure it's all working, you can do that as part of it. We've done that for one or two customers, as in the full-on DR test, where you literally go and switch off all your stuff and just really make sure it works. But just really being able to physically see that your server's booted is such a breath of fresh air, and will alleviate lots of people's concerns, because that's the thing, is that you sit on the screen waiting for the server to boot, and you just wait, and then how long does it take? And sometimes you sat there for hours hoping it's worked, and like, has it actually worked? Are we better off shutting it down and then trying to restore again? And it's that whole kind of process, really.
Exactly. Whereas what we've built into this business continuity solution is that every single incremental backup that's captured gets tested for data integrity. It gets tested to make sure that the file system is looking healthy, and we actually run a ransomware detection test on every single backup that's captured, just looking for signs of like a malware attack. and that takes place every backup. So if you're backing up every 5 minutes, we're checking that every 5 minutes.
Wow.
And then we'll do that full bootable recovery test, a minimum of once every day for every server. But that can again be configured according to the priority to run as often as once an hour if needed.
And does that? I guess that does a file level scan to pick up any kind of infected files, malicious files.
So what we're actually looking for with that ransomware detection is comparing the most recent backup to previous backups and looking for changes that might be symptoms of a ransomware attack. So a few key things we look for is a sudden increase in new data. A ransomware attack is going to be scanning through, encrypting files, and at a block level, that looks like lots of new block level writes. And so we can test for that. We also check file name extensions. So if there's 100 files in backup, the older backup that are, I don't know, Excel files, Word files, PowerPoint files, and all of a sudden they've had their file name extension changed, that's typically what a lot of ransomware infections will do, so we can test for that. And we also calculate something really techy called entropy, where we calculate entropy, the rate of data change for a file system, and compare that. And really those are all kind of indicators that there might be symptoms of a malware attack.
That is very clever, very, very clever. I didn't actually know about that one before.
There you go.
Learned something new. So the server looks like it's boosted now, which is very, very handy and fantastic to see it's done.
Yep, that was an Exchange server,
yeah.
so
wow,
it takes a little while to boot.
Exchange
with
as well. I mean, they're notorious for taking a very long time to boot and shut down and things.
But that's been in less than 5 minutes, I think.
Yeah,
and
that's incredible.
Really the difference between backup and business continuity. If all we had was a backup solution, we could get that actual Exchange database and the mailboxes back, but it would take us hours or days.
Yeah.
And throughout that whole time, the business can't run. They're not able to communicate over email, and that downtime costs organizations a lot of money. Yeah. Whereas with business continuity, not only is it backup, but it minimizes the cost of a disaster by reducing that downtime just to a few minutes.
Yeah, that's something we've seen quite a lot with, particularly with Exchange servers, because they can be notoriously slow to boot and shut down and things. Yeah. But just the reliance on that it is going to work, and you've just got to sit there and kind of hope and pray and wish that it works. But to have something you can just do so easily is fantastic.
Now there was a point that I made that kind of referred to what you were saying a little earlier.
I'm just going to quickly do the blinds because of now the focusing. It's now focusing on whenever Hogarth moves.
Oh, really?
Hopefully.
We're just going to adjust the camera or the blinds very quickly, apparently.
And that's going to change the white balance now as well. So we're either going to look washed out.
I'm already looking washed out anyway.
There you go.
You're a lot more tan than me, I think. Yeah, definitely.
That much more. But what I was going to say is that Datto has chosen to design its technology with service providers and managed service providers in particular in mind, like Tekkers. And so we design our technology to be delivered as a managed service. And it's not actually possible for small and medium business to come to Datto to buy our tech. We don't have a direct business because we feel that it's a bit kind of arrogant of us as a vendor to think that we could understand every small and medium business that's out there all around the world in every different market and cater to their needs. We just think it's impossible.
Yeah.
But you know who your customers are. You know their needs. You know their requirements. You've got fantastic relationships with them. We think it's ridiculous of a vendor to try and supplant those relationships of local IT suppliers. And so that's why we've chosen to design our technology for service providers, because it's you that knows and understands customers' requirements and are best positioned to spec these out and work with customers to actually deliver the service.
That is really fantastic, actually. I mean, and completely on a personal level point of view, we've had the likes of Symantec, I'll say, because we don't really sell them anymore. But we'd have like Symantec phoning customers direct saying like, you need to renew your software. It's like, we know, we've quoted them for it already, and we don't need any help because we know our customers, we know what they're going to do, we know their plans. More often than not, we move them over to Datto, but that was another issue anyway. But just to know that you're there when we need you to be is really, really helpful, and that we can just and we have the same relationship with a lot of our suppliers. Yeah. We always say to them that we know what we're doing. We just need to get on with things. When we need something, we'll phone you, and then we'll ask. We don't need the kind of constant help and here's more marketing information, here's more of this and more of that. It's like we know we're kind of doing it and dealing with it with our customers because we know our customers that well.
Well, that's the sign of a competent managed service provider, that they do have good in-house skills and resources, and they understand their customers, and then when the time is right and when they need to escalate something to one of their suppliers or one of their vendors, they can, and their vendor is there to have their back and really to ultimately help your customers stay online and keep their businesses up and running.
Just going back very quickly because I've remembered something.
Sure.
In terms of data retention, because I know that the Datto solution there's two options, I think, isn't there? So you can get like a year's retention or the indefinite retention. How does that tie in? Does it tie in, I guess, with the likes of GDPR and where you need to only hold on to your data for a certain period of time?
Yeah, so what you've just mentioned is our cloud service plans. There's actually one other element to it as well. So the actual Datto appliance that's sitting on site capturing backups has one set of retention, and that's entirely configurable by you and your customer. So if your customer wants to keep a week's worth of backups on site, it can be configured to do that. If it needs to be months or years, the on-site appliance can be configured to do that. And that's irrespective of the cloud plan. The cloud plan then gives you, as you correctly stated, either 1 year of backup retention offsite or indefinite. And when you choose the indefinite cloud plan, you can actually configure whether that's 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, or literally just forever.
Right.
So that's kind of the options that are available. And to come to your point around how does that fit in with maybe local compliance laws or things like the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, as it's more commonly known. Well, what's being stored in that retention is backup images. And those backup images aren't live. They're not immediately accessible. The only part of the overall solution that's immediately accessible is the production server, which is the source of the backups.
Yeah.
So let's say an end user, customer of one of the businesses that you manage the IT for, wants to invoke the right to be forgotten and have all of their personal identifiable information removed from the business's systems. They have to remove that from their live production system, but they don't have to remove that from every single incremental backup image that's stored throughout the overall retention because they're not live systems.
Yeah.
If that business does a database query, they're not going to be querying all their backups, they're going to be querying their live production system. And if they kind of expunge that record from their live production system, that's eventually going to trickle through the backups as new backups are created.
Yeah.
I'm not a GDPR expert. I'm not a solicitor or anything like that.
I remember that when it was all kicking off and GDPR was being implemented, that was one of the hot topics of do you need to go through backups and remove it? And it was just the process. I mean, tape backups. If you have to go through all of your tapes, it's just impossible. You just couldn't do it.
And even if it were possible, it's not needed because it's those records that are stored in backups aren't actually accessible because they're not in the live system.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if you're going to restore from a backup from 6 months ago and make it the live system, then you might have to repeat your record expunging. But there are things that we do in our technology stack that can help with things like compliance regulation. So one great example is encryption of data. We give you and your customers the option to encrypt both locally and offsite, and that is key to remain compliant for things like the GDPR and other regulations as well. So there are things about Datto's business continuity solution that can make life a lot easier when it comes to where your data is stored and what formats and media it's being stored in.
Brilliant. And so the Datto portfolio, I guess, in terms of the hardware and service it can provide, it can literally scale from a single server, with 500 gig of data or something, right up to the customers that have, 20, 30, 40 servers that might want to be protected, whether it's a mixture of virtual infrastructure, physical infrastructure, Linux, Windows, that kind of whole mix.
Yep, I actually brought one of our baby devices with me. So this is our entry-level baby Cirrus, and as you mentioned, it starts at 500 gigs of capacity. This particular model is a 1 terabyte model and starts at 1 terabyte, but we have capacity options that go from 500 gigs of storage capacity all the way through to 120 terabytes. Wow. The 120 terabyte one is a 4U rack mount server.
It's a lot larger, yeah.
Yeah, a lot larger. It wouldn't fit in my bag.
Not fit in your bag, no.
Didn't bring it with me. But really, we design our technology to fit all shapes and sizes of small and medium business.
And generally, it's basically a PC or a server, isn't it? Yeah. It's a little micro server or a bigger server if you go for the bigger models.
We've actually got 5 different hardware form factors. That little tiny one I brought with me, and then we've got a slightly larger desktop form factor, and then we have 3 rack mount form factors: a 1U, a 2U, and a 4U.
And those, in terms of when you're going up the scale into the larger customers, those can be, I believe you can spec them up so you can change processors and memory requirements, anything you need.
So our enterprise range, which are the 2U and the 4U, we use Intel Xeon processors with high core counts, big memory pools and so on, and we allow full flexibility of choosing the specific processor SKU if you want, so you can get different core to memory ratios, really to tune it according to the business's requirements. So if they've got 20 or 30 servers, they need to be backed up and protected. We can tune the appliance to match that.
And do you generally, and probably this is a question for me because it's quite interesting to know, when you're getting onto those large customers, do you then look at multiple appliances or do you just look at sizing one appliance that can... scale
Yeah.
with the hardware inside the one box?
It varies. It really depends on what the customer's priorities are. If they want to be able to recover all of their servers all at once, it's probably going to take a couple of appliances.
Right.
And actually, if you think about their main production environment, if they've got 20 or 30 servers, they're probably running virtualization.
Yeah.
And they've probably got a cluster of maybe 3 or 4 virtualization hosts that's running those 20 or 30 VMs. And so to expect one single Datto to take the place of 3 or 4 hosts, the math just doesn't add up. So
Right.
for larger environments where they want to be able to run lots of servers in a disaster, where it would be multiple appliances, to kind of mirror their main production environment. However, we also have Datto's Cloud to lean on. And as I mentioned earlier, Datto's Cloud, we've got hundreds of servers on standby. So the typical deployment will be still just a single appliance that might be enough to run 5 or 10 of their servers.
Just the core infrastructure or
Yeah,
something.
the core stuff, the important stuff. And then the other 20 or 30, maybe slightly less important, will run in Datto's Cloud. And we can bridge all that together as part of the same recovery.
Brilliant. That's really neat, actually, because you can then, like you say, so there's the hybrid cloud at that point. You're running some on-prem, some in the cloud, and get the best of both worlds until you can then get the hardware back to recover from and
Exactly.
get you back up to your operating again. Brilliant. Okay, well, I think that's probably all of my questions, I think, for the moment. And is there anything else you can think of to run through, possibly, or
Well, I
worth
actually have a
covering?
question for you guys.
Please do.
What's the typical lifespan for your customers in terms of a business continuity solution? I mean, a year, 3 years, 5 years?
Lifespan in terms of how long it would last?
Yeah.
Well, it's difficult because looking back to the days of traditional tapes and USB drives, it's generally tapes will probably last forever, but then you haven't got the recovery or business continuity. USB drives, it's one of those, and I struggle with USB drives because they might work one day and might not work the next day.
Yeah.
That could be 6 months, could be a couple of years in terms of longevity. But in terms of generally the backup products, we always assess every single year to try and figure out what's the best step to do the next year. So there's no real set longevity from backup kind of products itself, I guess, really. But we always, if we align it with the customer's hardware, so we always kind of, traditional way of doing kind of the IT refreshes would be nowadays probably more towards every 4 or 5 years. It used to be kind of 5 to 7 years, but technology seems to be changing so quickly nowadays. And it's actually more often the software that's pushing the hardware changes rather than the hardware kind of coming to an end and dying. It's more a case that new software comes out, you need faster stuff that you just don't have in your existing kit. So we always try and align the backup product, the backup solution, and the continuity solution with the hardware that we're selling. If we're going to sell something that's going to have a 4 or 5 year life expectancy, you want to try and make sure you've got a backup solution that's going to mirror that as well.
Yeah, of course. I guess nobody has that crystal ball where they can look at a business's IT infrastructure and say, well, this is what you're going to need for the next 5 years. Things do change.
Obviously, try as best as you can to do that and make sure you've got the scale and the capacity to grow is the important thing.
Well, like I say, you hit the nail on the head there. And we actually include that principle in our continuity solutions. So a significant number of our on-premise appliances can have their storage pools expanded. So that, you can put a solution, have it last 3 years, 3 years or 5 years, and then if suddenly the business is really successful, they're growing faster than that, you can potentially expand the storage pool to cater for that. And we also have some really fantastic kind of device swap-out programs as well that allows a customer to move from a smaller device to a bigger device and migrate from one to the other really painlessly, that I know that you've looked at and offered to your customers.
That's been incredible, actually, because you literally you just pay the difference. And you go up to the next model up, or a bigger model that's got more capacity and more storage and more CPU power or what have you. But you don't have to then ditch the device you've already paid for and then buy a whole new device. You can literally just pay the difference and upgrade, which is fantastic, because obviously it's quite a big investment for a business continuity solution to commit everything into that box that's going to do everything, and to then have to go, well, actually, no, we're going to park you to one side now and get this bigger one. It's a bit of a shame, but with Datto, it has been, that's something I wouldn't expect from anyone. Just to say, no, we'll take your device back and, you can just pay the difference. It's just, incredible.
Again, we try to make things as easy as possible for small and medium businesses, because we realize that, an SMB isn't necessarily going to want to have to buy whole new appliances every time they might need to make a small change. Like if you're a big enterprise with hundreds of millions of pounds or dollars budget every year, you can absorb that, but that's just not the case for the vast majority of organizations out there.
Could you just explain very briefly just the difference between, because there's an Alto kind of product that you supply as well as a Cirrus, and the Altos, we still got quite a few of them out there because they do fit quite kind of a fairly niche market. Perhaps just explain the differences between what are the differences between them?
Sure. So
Because it looks a lot like that box down there, the Alto,
Yeah,
doesn't
it's
it?
a different colour though. It's blue instead
Oh,
of
okay.
black. Yeah. So the box I was holding up earlier is about the size of a box of tissues. It's kind of small square thing. It's a very similar form factor to an Intel NUC. So just Google Intel NUC and you'll know what we're talking about. And so the Alto looks pretty similar. Alto and Cirrus are our two brand names for our appliances, and they actually run the same software stack. It's exactly the same code on both of those products.
Right.
The difference comes in the hardware. So in Alto, we don't give it the same level of compute and memory. So the CPU is a down-rated CPU. It doesn't have as much RAM. And Alto is only available in one storage capacity. So it's a fixed 2 terabyte drive, which is still pretty generous. But Cirrus is available in something like 18 or 20 different capacities. It's much more flexible. And we give it much more powerful hardware. So more powerful CPUs. We give it solid-state drives when we need it. And it's a more scalable platform. So that's difference number one, the hardware. Difference number two, because Alto doesn't have quite the same hardware grunt, we do limit a few software features. So even though it's the same code, we turn off a few features on Alto because it simply doesn't have the horsepower to run them. So it can't do some of the more advanced local recovery options. It can still recover in Datto's cloud. It can still do things like file restores and bare metal restores, but it doesn't have the grunt to do a local virtualization.
Yeah, so you can't boot it up locally.
No.
Yeah.
And Alto also doesn't have the same abilities for things like local encryption. Again, it just doesn't have the horsepower to encrypt data as it's being processed.
Okay.
But as a result, it is available at a much more affordable cost. You can understand that we've made those kind of compromises for really small businesses that maybe don't need some of those more advanced features, but also have a kind of more restricted budgets as a result.
We sell a lot of those with like single server customers, small, very, very small businesses, micro businesses that have a single like micro server, or even just a single, not anymore, but small business servers, those kind of areas where you just literally have a single box.
Yeah, the old SBS 2011 is starting
Good old
to go.
SBS, yes. Thankfully, I don't think we have any more of them out there, which is very good because it was end of life quite a while ago.
Yeah. But that's kind of Cirrus and Alto. Alto is really designed for small businesses, no more than 4 servers, but the average for Alto is typically 1, maybe 2. So it really marries with the way you use it. Whereas Cirrus, some of our smaller Cirruses have a limit of the number of servers they can protect, but the vast majority, so our business, professional, enterprise ranges, there's no limit to the number of servers they can protect. It's just more around the storage and compute and memory resources. Those are the bottlenecks.
Brilliant. Cool. Thank you. That definitely helps explain the difference.
Yeah, no problem.
That's perfect. Thank you. Do you have any other questions?
No, that was it for me. I really appreciate you having me on. It's been a real wild ride.
Thank you for coming on. So I think that's probably going to be it for today, unless we've got any questions from the audience at all. I don't know if we've had any. No? Cool. That's fine. So we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for coming along today. Really appreciate it. That is episode 3 of the Tech Talk Show. You can listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Go to techtalk.show, I think is the website. We've got a site set up for it now. And obviously on YouTube and all the usual LinkedIn and Facebook and what have you. And thanks for watching, listening, whatever you're doing. And see you in the next one. Bye-bye.